Hi guys, welcome to episode 50 of Life for Your Soul. We are finalizing our topic arc on the Sabbath with our application activation episode. We have a lot of practical tips and takeaways, so stay tuned, don't go anywhere, and see you in a minute.
Hey everybody, welcome to Life for Your Soul, or welcome back if you are one of our routine audience members. We're so happy that you're here. We are having our A&A episode today on the Sabbath. So if you're not familiar with that, we are going to give you some practical takeaways on things that you can do right now to start implementing a Sabbath practice into your weeks and your days. And we're kind of going to give you a couple of different takeaways and some perspectives that we have that we hope will be helpful to you. So that is what our episode is about today. Rachel, are you so excited?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is a wrap up. So for all y'all not familiar with our layout, we have 3 episodes per topic typically, and this is our 3rd one, and we're gonna tie up all those loose ends that we didn't cover in the first 2 episodes.
Absolutely. And we've had some takeaways that we have purposely saved for this episode because, we want to package all of our awesome little practical tips into one place for you, which is really cool. So take a minute right now to give us a thumbs up if you're like, yeah, love it. That would be really great. It helps the YouTube algorithm with us a lot. And so we're going to get into it. So let's say you have listened to our introduction episode. You watched that awesome conversation that we had with Anwin last week. If you did not, I'm going to put the cards up here right now to link to that episode. So you should definitely click on that and watch that one first if you haven't seen it yet. We are talking in this episode at the end about some of the spiritual principles that Anwin was talking about. So if you're not super familiar with the Sabbath, then you're going to want to watch that one first so you know what we're talking about. All right. So I thought something that would be interesting for us is to talk about my process that I've been through with the Sabbath. So I've been practicing the Sabbath for 2 to 3 years now, very intentionally. And the reason why I wanted to talk about it is because there's a lot of things that I did that I feel would be really helpful to maybe steer you guys in the right direction. Like I said, now that we've had those 2 episodes and you're like, okay, I'm ready, help me figure out how to do this. That is why we're talking about it. One of the things that I mentioned briefly in one of our previous episodes was that I used to start our Sabbath on Saturday morning, and I would observe it all day Saturday. And I kind of liked that idea because it left Friday nights open for us to have activities. But the downside of it was, again, this is being practical, right? Like the downside of it was Saturday nights were then taken up with our Sabbath. And so if there was any event on a Saturday night, then, we were supposed to say no, right? Because we're supposed to be with our family. Something that I was talking about before, which is like when I wake up in the morning on Saturdays for Sabbath, it didn't feel quite as restful. And I was struggling with a way to interpret that and put it to words, and I'm still struggling with a way to put it to words. All I can say is that for us, starting our Sabbath on a Saturday morning and having it be all day Saturday, it just does not feel as restful and as complete and as satisfying to our soul as it did when we actually started on Friday night. Biblically, Shabbat starts on Friday night. That is the cessation of work. And so lots of people lead into their Sabbath from Friday night. And when my family started doing that, we felt a dramatic shift in our practicing and in our rest. We started resting on Friday night. As it turned out, most people didn't really plan a lot of things on Friday nights. When you are in that stage of life where you have kids and you're married, a lot of stuff is like Friday night becomes family night. How many people do you know growing up that had like Friday night pizza night at home, or they had like family game night, or, stuff like that, right? So, we ended up doing that as well for our family. And so it was really exciting for my kids. We told them like, hey, Friday starts Shabbat. So there's no chores on Friday night. Get your chores done ahead of time. There was no chores on Saturday. They were really excited about that. And so that's just kind of like a little practical takeaway for you guys as parents. If you have older kids who are doing chores, it's a really good way to teach them how to work is okay, and it makes them enjoy that rest that they get on Saturday. So it's teaching them that it's okay to take a day of rest. And as a kid, you're like, yeah, a day with no chores. Like, you're really excited about that. And so it's just a really a really easy way to get them excited about a Sabbath is just like, no choice.
Yeah, even with training kids, because you gotta remember when you're a kid, everything seems like eternal. Like it's like you always feel like the weekend's never gonna come, and the school week is forever. Like so it's one of those things where you can really capitalize on showing them like time limits and having a calendar and having it on the calendar and say, here we have this many days to this, or and if kids are naturally excited about Sabbath. Naturally excited about Saturdays.
Yeah, true.
Right, because it's like no school, right? So you can capitalize on that innate thing about that they're already experiencing, but like really try to then use it to gear towards the Lord and gear towards understanding, like talking about work and talking about rest and why there's a balance there, and so it's you can always turn anything like that into a learning opportunity.
Yeah, and I would encourage you, for us, as it turns out, that I like also shifting it sunset to sunset as well, because Saturday night, if there is a wedding or a party or a family function or something like that, then it's cool, because you're not like, you don't have to feel bad like you're breaking Sabbath rules or whatever, because it's over anyway. For some people, I do want to make the caveat, hanging out with your friends and your family might actually be a part of your Sabbath rest. That fellowship might be really recharging for you. For me personally, it's not. Like going and socializing and doing those things does not always, recharge me. So for me, that would not be restful. Like if I'm just hanging out with Rachel and she and I are hanging out talking and like having coffee or something, like that would be fine. But if it really goes beyond like 2 or 3 people, it's like, no, this is too much for me. So, so you have to kind of seek that for yourself of what that looks like for you. Yeah. So I would also just encourage you in that sense as well, that if it's not Friday night for you, maybe Thursday to Friday works better for you, whatever the case is for your particular schedule and your circumstances, I would just encourage you to just try doing the sunset to sunset approach. It is biblical, and that is how God ordered our days. And so I do feel like there is a supernatural component that goes into honoring that and honoring that timeline. So I would just encourage you to try it. Even if you only start with a nighttime, you're just going to start with taking an evening off, and that's the place that you want to start. Of course, we encourage you to do the full 24 hours, but if you need a starting place, start with that. Start with the evening.
And also don't get hung up on the sunset to sunset, literally. Like you can do sunset to sunset, but like Virginia, I think you said in a previous episode that you just kind of picked 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
5 to 5, because that is the average between when the sun goes down. I think it's more about the evening component of like starting with dinner. Like if you think about it that way, you'll have more flexibility throughout the year. Because if you want to get super literal about it, some days are really long in the summer and really short in the afternoon. In the winter. Mm-hmm. And like in England, in the winter and higher altitudes, it gets dark at 3. So yeah, we're not in the Middle East. Like guys,
this is true.
We're not in the Middle East. Okay, we don't have the same sunset sunrise as Israel does. So it's okay. Like if you want to get a stickler, why don't you just look up what the clock timing is for Israel?
Yeah, I think it's just
and
helpful.
Sync your watches that way,
right?
But it's like a guideline. Like if you really want to try the whole sunset to sunset thing and be very specific, go ahead by all means. But
and listen,
also,
I think that there's totally merit. I think there's totally merit to it, because of the sun is long, for at least for us in the northern hemisphere, right? The sun is longer in the summertime. It's shorter in the winter. In the winter, we're supposed to be more kind of holed up. And if the sun sets at 4, then the sun sets at 4 and, your evening starts, and your body, because of our circadian rhythm, like our body starts to want to snuggle up a little bit when it gets darker anyway. So if you want to follow that method, you can, if that feels right to you. However, I personally like to kind of aggregate it, like Rachel said, to 5 or 6 o'clock every week, because for me, in the wintertime, if the sun's setting at 4, 4:30, I will totally use it as an excuse of like, okay, I'm shutting down, I'm not working, I won't finish my projects or things I need to get done because it's already nighttime. Like I might as well just stop for the day. And that's not always very helpful for me in my life. Whereas in the summertime, I don't want to be like, oh, well, I have an excuse to work until 9 o'clock at night because the sun hasn't set yet because it's July. Like,
exactly.
Yeah. So,
and then also too is like eating late like that. Like some people just, they're like, I can't eat dinner at 9 o'clock at night. Like,
no. Yeah.
Especially when you have kids and stuff. So like, like we said, it's all about the principle of the thing and the point of it. Not don't get caught up in any weird minutia that might block you from doing it. Like
Right. We talked
don't want
about
to stop.
ditches.
We don't want you to be like, oh crap, I can't. I can't start at 9. Like,
Yeah.
no, like, or whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
whatever. I go to bed at 9. Maybe some people are literally like, I go to bed before the sun sets in the
Right.
summertime. At that point, you're like, okay, well, what's the
Right.
point of
And let's not
resting?
be like the Pharisees, right? Or the leaders of the synagogue. Like Jesus said that God made Sabbath for man. So that means that he made it for us. He goes on to say he did not make man for the Sabbath. We are not designed to just follow all the Sabbath rules and this is what we have to do all the time. We don't have to do that. So it is designed for us. It's to help us find rest in God. And that is why we're doing it. So just keep that at the center of your planning process. I used to, we would plan ahead a little bit and we would clean the kitchen and do chores and stuff. Rachel actually used to help me clean my house on Fridays. And because the house was so clean on Friday in preparation for the weekend, I would spend more time on Saturdays cleaning. And I would kind of get lost in that and I would get tripped up like, oh, well, the house is so clean. Now's a perfect opportunity to like clean those baseboards because my baseboards are a pain point for me. Or now's a perfect opportunity to insert project here, right? That I would want to do now that these other things are taken care of because the house is clean. And that's something that I've actually had to put down. For some people, like Anwin spoke about in our previous conversation, organizing a room or an office might actually be a very sanctified and holy activity for you to do with the Lord. But what I found for myself was that I was actually getting hung up in the maintenance and of the home. And like, I need to maintain the cleanliness of it because it's so hard that if I let it slip away, that I won't be able to get back on top of the mess. It'll just build up. And so for me, having to purposely say, okay, I'm going to clean the kitchen and get things ready on Friday, but Friday night, I'm not doing the dishes Friday night. Like I'm going to let them sit. They'll be fine until Saturday night. It'll be okay. On Saturday morning, like making food if I do anything or whatever and letting them be there. That actually for me was kind of like a crucifying of the flesh of me trying to be in control of everything and being on top of everything and feeling the need that I had to maintain everything like that. So for me personally, it's something that I purposely do not do those chores on Saturday because I get caught up in this cycle of like having to perform all the time to stay on top of things. And so that's my way that I have to trust in the Lord, that it will be okay. Things won't pile up and get out of control just because I've taken a few hours off from doing the dishes. There are things that practically, like my husband, sometimes he might do the dishes on Saturday. It's not a big deal to him. I think he actually enjoys it. For me, that's something that I personally am not doing. So I'll step away. So anyway, I know that's like very specific, but just know that there's a lot of flexibility in what you can do because at the center of all of it is seeking the Lord. What does he want you to do? What is he telling you to do and not do? And listen to Holy Spirit, because he really does care. He wants to be involved in every activity of our life. He wants to be involved in those small details. So if Holy Spirit's prompting you or says, hey, like this might be a little stumbling block, this might be a little area we need to refine, then I really encourage you to lean into that and to listen to it. And then the last thing I'll say about my kind of evolution in the Sabbath practice has been that a lot of times when we have events and we're planning things, friends or family will call up and they're like, hey, I'm thinking about getting together on X day or whatever. So what I've started to do is purposely guide those plans to, if it was supposed to be Saturday at lunch, like, hey, maybe let's do dinner instead. Or, if it's something that they want to do on Saturday, it's like, okay, well, does Sunday work for anyone? And then we'll do it like after church on Sunday. And so it doesn't always work out that way, but I have found that in that planning process, people, if they're calling you to get some input on an event, they want your input. So it's a very easy way to kind of set your own boundaries and honor your own boundaries for your Sabbath without having to be like, well, no, I can't do it because it's Saturday afternoon. Instead of just saying, you could say, Actually, do you think we could do Saturday night? Like, that would be really great if we could do that on Saturday night. Or if it's a daytime event, like, oh, could we do it on Sunday? Really works well for me. And people are usually really amenable to that, and they'll change. And so that's what I have found, that if I can just steer some of those plans the other direction, then you can still be involved and participate in things in your life without having to feel like you're being left out because you're honoring your Sabbath.
And then if you're someone who like has to work every Saturday, like there was a time in my life where my work schedule with retail, I mean, I worked almost every Saturday, Sunday. And then I did end up working for a company that was every Saturday, but then they had every Sunday and Monday off. So Monday like really was my Sabbath because we did a bunch of stuff at church on Sunday. So like, it can be whatever it is that you've decided is going to be your rest day. Then, you can work within those parameters, like Virginia said. To me, like there's certain things I do every day that's like base level maintenance. It's more restful for me to have a clean kitchen at the end of the night. And that's not a big deal because like it's a daily practice. Like I don't, you know what I mean? It's like I don't even do it without thinking. It's like it just is like I close up the kitchen every night, no biggie. But Virginia has a lot of kids and a lot of dishes and, so like, something you could do is like, have takeout and then use, plastic forks and plates and things that you can just throw out that night, like
sure.
There's things you can do that if it really stresses you out, but you really feel like you shouldn't, well then, prep food ahead of time or, use disposable dishes and stuff like that. Like,
yeah,
it's not the end
so
of the
good.
world if you use plastic forks and paper plates one night a week,
Yeah, I think about that often, actually, when I'm getting overwhelmed with, like I said, I kind of get in these cycles of like, I have to stay on top of everything or it's going to fall apart. If I'm getting a little bit too crazy with that in my mindset, my husband will go out to the store and he will buy paper plates and plastic forks and knives and stuff, for the kids. And I don't like when he buys that because I'm like, no, we'll just do the dishes. We'll just put it in the dishwasher, whatever. So he doesn't ask me anymore. He just goes and he gets them because once they're in the house, of course, we're going to use them. And he does that as a small little token of love towards me. Like, it's okay. Just like let them throw their stuff away. It'll be fine.
Yeah, because like at Virginia's house, like literally it's like 500 cups at the end of the day that need to be washed.
It's so
like
bad.
doing the dishes twice a day, running the dishwasher twice a day, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
When you have a small army at home, I've helped clean 2 different families with a small army at home, and it was a lot of dishes. It's literally like running the dishwasher twice a day.
Yeah.
So I get
sure.
that, and this is where we're talking about how it can be individual for everybody because, don't get hung up on the specifics, but like whatever. Maybe we can talk about that verse when Jesus said in Matthew 6, he says, do not be anxious. Do not worry and be anxious for nothing. There's a couple different versions of that verse, but, do not be dismayed. Don't worry. Don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will take care of itself. Like there's a certain component, like where is your sticking point of worry and panic? Like, if it's more stressful for you to not do the dishes, if it only takes you 10 minutes to do the dishes, then just do the 10 minutes to do the dishes. Like, even in the Bible, it said, like, Jesus, they were squabbling about the Sabbath and what you could do and not do. And the Jews to, like, the Pharisees to be so sure that they didn't do it wrong, they had all these extra rules on top of the just general rest rules.
Exactly.
So they would be like, well, you can't thresh wheat, or you can't, like, it got to the point where when Jesus and his disciples were hungry and they were walking down the road and there were some grains of wheat that they could just pick and just literally, it's like picking berries, but in this case it was picking wheat. They were just eating it. And they're like, you can't do that. That's working. That's gathering grain on Sabbath. Like, and Jesus like, that's where he was like, the Sabbath is for man, not meant for the Sabbath.
Exactly.
And he's like, you would save a donkey. Like, if your donkey fell into a pit and broke its leg, like, you would save the donkey. Like, you would do the labor. You wouldn't go, oh, well, it's Sabbath. I can't get my donkey out of the pit. Like, and they were getting mad at Jesus because Jesus was healing on the Sabbath. They were like, somebody got healed. You like touched them and they got healed on the Sabbath. That's work. Like, come on, guys. Like,
work for who? Because none of you are doing that.
Exactly. Jesus was like, seriously, like the only thing you can find to quabble about is that people got healed on the Sabbath. So that's where, don't get too like I said, in
Yeah.
the minutia, and it's different for everybody, and it's
Yeah.
gonna, and don't be afraid to let it evolve and change, like Virginia said. Like, just
Right.
start off, like, just try something. If it's not working or God redirects you, then switch it up. Like a lot of people, I think, we do communion at church. A lot of churches do communion maybe once a month or once a quarter. You could do communion every day or once a week. And honestly, like doing Shabbat and during, your Sabbath rest would be a great time to do communion with your family. Like, if you don't do communion with your family on a regular basis, like, start off. Like, that could be your thing. Like, kick off Friday night with doing communion.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's definitely things that you can do that create a fun tradition around it, get the kids involved. I think Virginia said in another episode, but we'll reiterate it here. But, like, I think you said that the kids get a special dessert on Friday nights.
Yeah.
Like something where the kids look forward to, like, oh, I get my dessert,
Yeah, exactly.
Something out of the ordinary, or that maybe there's a certain game you guys play, or whatever it is that makes it special and makes it set aside. That's going to help get the whole family excited about it and looking forward to it, so that it's not laborious, right? Like, it's supposed to be
Right.
rest. It's not supposed to be like more worry and stress.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of the thing for me with the dishes is it almost became like an idol where everything had to be clean and stay clean. And I have 6 children. It is not at all practical in my life that anything is going to stay clean. It's not going to stay clean. And I would just get angry about it. I'm like, I just cleaned that sink. Don't put your peanut butter spoon in there. It's like, come on, it's a thing. So for me, that's why I was saying it's like a crucifying of my flesh practice, because it was growing into something that was not okay. And I don't care who you are. If you have 6 children, there's a level, or 5 or 7 or whatever, there's a level with kids that you have to start to just learn how to let things go. Like the people talk about picking your battles. I don't think of that so much as like a disciplinary thing of like, if your kid's acting out in this area, I'm not going to correct them because this one's more important. I think of it more as like, what are you really going to spend your, I hate to use this word, but like your peace on? Like, are you really going to let yourself be super upset because there's a peanut butter spoon in the sink? Like, we have to let some of these things go. But to encourage you, we're talking about verses. So Isaiah 26, verse 3, in the New Living Translation, in this verse, it says, "You will keep in perfect peace all who trust in you, all whose thoughts are fixed on you." And in the NET, I like this version as well. It says, "You keep completely safe the people who maintain their faith, for they trust in you." And I like that I like that verse in both translations, because we talked about, again, it takes a level of trust to rely on God, to know that the things that you're putting down are still going to be okay when you pick them back up again. If you take a day off of work, your business is not going to collapse because you took a day off of work. Your boss is not going to freak out and fire you because you took a day off of work. There's a level of, and like Rachel was talking about those verses in Matthew, talking about not being anxious and worry. It also says, like, the birds don't worry about where their meal is going to come from. He provides for the birds in the air. And so I think that's such a great, beautiful thing, because birds are everywhere. So like every time you can see a bird, it's like this reminder of God provides for them. They have no job. They have no income. Like, they can't do anything for the Lord other than what he created them to do. And he provides for them. And so it's a really good reminder for us that we trust in him, and then his presence is with us and his peace is with us because he's caring for us when we put our trust in him. And that Sabbath practice, which is why I like it in the NET, who maintain their faith for they trust in God, is because Sabbath is a spiritual discipline. It is a discipline of our faith. We're maintaining our faith by trusting in God and taking this day to set it apart and make it holy and be with him and seek him for what he wants us to do. Okay. So a couple of takeaways as we wrap up this episode. We have like 5 main takeaways for you. Number 1 is think through some boundaries that you want to set for yourself for the Sabbath. If you have a partner, if you have a family, then, if your kids are older, maybe you can ask them, but really think through some boundaries that you do want to set. Like we mentioned before, for myself, I'm not going to hang out with a bunch of people. Like a group setting is not going to be where I'm spending my Sabbath. My husband, as an example, has a very servant heart and he really loves to help people. So if they ask for his help, it's usually on a Saturday, right? Because that's people are not working. And he will go and do all kinds of things on a Saturday. And in certain circumstances, that's okay because it's helping a family in need or something that's important, right? Like Rachel mentioned, like you're going to save your donkey if it falls, in the ditch or whatever. But because of that servant heart, we have to kind of set some boundaries, which usually looks like me helping him set those boundaries of, hey, you can't say yes to everything. Like your family wants to spend time with you. Our kids, now that they're going back to school, they're gone away. So they don't really get to spend a ton of time with us now, except for the weekends. And so we have to really keep that time to maintain our family unit as well. So just think through some of those things. Like it doesn't, like we said before, it doesn't have to be rigid. It can be fluid. You can move it around. But just think through that thought process of like, what are some boundaries that you want to give for yourself and your family? All right. Number 2, which is really supposed to be number 1, is seek the Lord on your Sabbath. Everywhere in the Bible, if you just go in your Bible app and type the word Sabbath, you will see verse after verse talking about setting the Sabbath apart, making it holy, seeking the Lord, because that day is supposed to be for seeking him and honoring him and trusting him. And so we really need to not only seek the Lord in the sense of find out what it is that he wants you to do or not do for your Sabbath. And then also you're supposed to spend some time seeking him on your Sabbath. So reading the Bible, praying as a family, doing things that bring joy to the Lord. Those are the kind, like you should be seeking him and honoring him in your Sabbath. It's not just about taking a day off and breaking from your work. We're really seeking him and trusting in him for our provision. And so we have to touch back to him. We have to talk to him. We have to commune with him. So you can start that practicing. That's point number 3, is start practicing. Put it in your calendar. If you're a calendar person, if you've got a lot of stuff going on, block off your Saturdays or whatever day it is that you pick, right? Block that time off in your calendar. Make it very practical for yourself. If you have a hard time setting that boundary, then if you're married, tell your spouse, if you have close friends that you can trust to help keep you accountable, tell them like, hey, I'm a workaholic. Can you help me try to not do stuff on this day? Because I really need to rest. If you have a very involved family life, like extended family, tell them too. Like if there's people in your life who you trust to help you be accountable, then let them help you keep those boundaries for yourself as well, because that will help too. If you think that they're gonna give you a hard time, if maybe you have family members that are unsaved or they won't respect your boundaries, maybe not. You might have to, keep those boundaries yourself. But I'm just saying, if you have people in your life who you trust to help you with that. All right. Number 4 is find some tools to help you in areas that you need help. One thing that I wanted to say real quick before we jump really into this is one of the things that the Lord showed for me in particular that might be helpful to you is think through some things in that boundary setting that you can use to guide your yeses and your nos. If you're new to this and you're like, I don't really know how I'm supposed to do this or how I'm not. So one of the things that the Lord showed for me was that if anything is either physically to the extreme or mentally to the extreme, it's a hard no. If anything involves both of those items, it's a hard no. As an example, there was a Saturday that I went to Rachel's house and I helped her with some things in her life. Physically, it was not very demanding. And for me, mentally, it wasn't very demanding because I wasn't the one making decisions. Rachel had to make decisions, so that was more taxing for her mentally than it was for me. And that was okay. But there are days that, we have helped someone move and move huge pieces of furniture and stuff. And that is that's physical to the extreme. And so it was too taxing and we didn't feel rested. And then it felt like our Sabbath went away. And then the whole next week, it was a lot harder for us to just be graceful with each other and to be okay and to make it until the next Sabbath. And we were looking forward to that next Sabbath as a way of redoing it and having a do-over because we had done too much on that Saturday. Same thing goes for mental. if you have to cram for an exam, if you have to write a 10-page paper, if you have to do your taxes or something, like try not to do anything that's mentally super taxing. And then, like I said, if someone like Anne would mentioned, organizing her office is not super physically taxing or mentally taxing. It's not really either. It's just a little bit of both. And that was okay for her as a way to practice her Sabbath. But those are just some of the boundaries that the Lord kind of helped me to see, like, hey, run this little checklist. Is it super to the extreme of physical or mental? It's a no. Is it like moderate and it involves both things? It's a no, right? So keep things easy, keep things light. And so that was my practice as a little checklist. And maybe you can use something similar for your practice to see if that's something that will help you figure out what you should do or what you shouldn't do. So back to number 4, finding some tools to help you in different areas of your life. So like we talked about in our introduction episode, I have that filter that turns on my phone that shuts everything down. I set that for myself because I kind of get into a workaholic mode. Like half of the month, I'm always working constantly, and it's hard for me to turn that part of my brain off. So if I pick up my phone and it says go away, I'm like, okay. I remember I have set this boundary for myself. Let me honor that. There are settings where you can have text messages not come through. Phone won't ring if it's not, an emergency or certain people. You can have apps that just don't work, apps that don't even show up on your screens. So things that you find yourself like, for me, scrolling on social media, I really find it actually sucks my energy and it draws me away. So I try to stay off social media completely on the Sabbath as well. So there are little tools and things that you can find that'll help you if you need some help getting into the practice. And if you, like for me, I don't necessarily feel like I need that help because I've been practicing it for so long now that I feel like I can maintain it on my own. But it's still, to this day, is helpful to have that visual reminder of like, go away. Okay. And so our final point and takeaway that we hope that you can implement into your Sabbath is just the reminder that we need to find a way to start resting in God in everyday moments, as of course, starting with the Sabbath, but find a way to honor him and be with him and sit with him every day of the week. One of the things that Anne talked about in our last episode was that, she'll sit on the deck or on her back porch with her husband and drink some coffee and, leave her kids in the house. She has older kids and just leave them in there and they'll be inside the house and she has a quiet moment with her husband where she just sits with him. Or when the kids were younger, she would just sit in a chair with some worship music while her kids play and just take that moment to say, hey, God, I'm here, meet me in this place. So finding those opportunities to honor him on the Sabbath, but also in everyday moments throughout your entire day. Like find moments to just be apart for a minute, be still, or just close your eyes and take a deep breath and just check in with God, because that will start to build that communion with him. It'll be easier for you to hear him and hear Holy Spirit and how he wants to direct your days and your steps, and your weeks and your months and your years, and giving you vision for that. So that is the biggest takeaway that we will say, is just finding that way to start resting in God in everyday moments and not just your Sabbath.
A couple of things I could add to what Virginia was saying is, one, just doing a lot of counseling in church, through church. I would say I've done a lot of counseling and inner healing, deliverance stuff with people. And everyone's makeup is different. Like their psychology, what energizes them, what stresses them, is what traumatizes them. It's all unique to each person. Don't compare your Sabbath to somebody else's, right? Partner with Holy Spirit as to what your Sabbath is supposed to look like. Part of being in the rest of God is self-acceptance, in the sense that, like, God made you a certain way. And yes, like, once we are really entered into rest with him and partnering with him, we will have more of the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control, in Galatians chapter 5. You will have those personality traits, but that doesn't mean your small quirks that make you disappear. Like if being around people drains you and being by yourself energizes you, that's not gonna that doesn't need to change. It's not going to change.
Yeah.
Like your life with little kids, like Ammon said last week, is going to look different. It's just going to be different. It's
Yeah.
going to be a time and a place where you're just going to have to work around the parameters of your life.
So
And you
good.
can't wait around for the parameters of your life to shift or change for you to become restful. And the physical rest. So it said that God, created the world, and then on the seventh day he rested from his work. There's really the reason why we have a Sabbath rest is mostly because we're human in a human world, and we are not. We don't have unlimited energy and unlimited mental capacity, and you need to rest, like just physically. So that's really what the Sabbath is about. Like, is just taking the faith of going, I'm trusting God that I can rest once a week, and He's got me. He's my safety net. He's gonna bless me. He's gonna take care of all those things for me. In Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 is trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding, and all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your paths. So there's a certain component of you make that choice. So that's in the natural, right? Like the Sabbath is cool because it's like a dual thing. It's in the natural and it's in the spiritual. And when you trust Him in the natural and give your faith into that area, it helps you have faith for what Virginia was saying about every day, like to be able to commune with Him every day, to have that faith to process stuff every day. And practically speaking, because like if Jesus says, do not worry or be anxious for anything, like for nothing, He's like literally no thing, nothing. Like you should never be anxious or worry. Well, how many of us can say that we've never been anxious or worried? Like it's a battle,
Yeah.
There's usually something every week or even every day that could come up that could potentially be a source of anxiety or worry. And when God says don't do that, He's basically saying that He says, take your yoke upon me, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And so when we go to Jesus, we're like, okay, Jesus is saying we do these things. Don't worry, don't be anxious. Take on my burden because it's light, and it's not a hardship. And He's like, okay, well, I'm going to trust you, Jesus, that is true. And in Hebrews chapter 4, saying you've entered into the Sabbath rest as like your whole existence technically is a Sabbath rest. And the reason why it's a Sabbath rest is because He supernaturally has given you the ability to not be anxious or worry. And in Matthew chapter 6, He's saying, don't be like the Gentiles who worry about these things. Like they're running, it's, my paraphrase would be, the rest of the world is running around like a chicken with their head cut off, scrambling for money, power, influence, protection, provision. They have to do it all on their own because they're not partnering with God. And, we don't want to look like that. We don't want to be like that. In the practical sense, if you are coming to God daily and being like, God, I give you my day, I'm resting in you, then He's going to be able to be more free to guide you on your daily tasks. So like when you do work, like you need to have God's guidance on when you don't work on the Sabbath, which is what we've been talking about for the past 3 episodes. But you also need His guidance on what to do when you do work.
Yeah.
And so the boundaries of not working also need to be boundaries in place for when you do work, because you can't work 24/7. You can't do everything. You can't take care of your kids and be a CEO of a company and run a marathon. Like, what I mean? Like, there's going to be some things that, like, something's got to give.
Right.
And that's where you have to seek the Lord on being restful and not being anxious, because, like, if you have an anchor point of going, okay, God told me this is my priority for this week, and I'm going to focus on that. There's my rest. Like, I'm resting in the fact that, okay, I'm not going to worry about these other things because He told me I'm supposed to work on this week. Or I'm a mother, so I know my priority are my kids, and I know I'm blessed when I prioritize them because the Lord has given me that job. Okay, that's
Right.
like, that's already said and done, right? And then if that's the case, just like on a Saturday where you're like, okay, I can help my friend out this week. Like, let's say once a month, you're like, hey, I can do something fun with my friend to help them. Like, help him do something. Like Jacob, he likes help, okay, but maybe I shouldn't do that every weekend,
Right.
And then it gets to the point where you have a field for your week. You're like, okay, well, how many scholastic events can we do? How many get-togethers can we do? How many church meetings can we do? How many, there's a certain point where you have to say no and set boundaries on your work life, because if you don't do that, then it doesn't behoove you if you're like stressed out, wringing it out to its full extent every day, and then you rest one day a week.
Yeah.
Like, that's not what we're talking about. Like, you work and you be productive and you honor the Lord and you trust him to direct your path and you trust him to direct every component of your life, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, and also your rest day. Right? That's really what we're saying. It's like, it's across the whole spectrum. Like Virginia's saying, if you set boundaries, it's like maybe, with your family and where you are in your life right now, you can only do 2 outings a week. Like where your family is out of the house going somewhere. Maybe it's only 1 weekend event a month. You have to have these levels where you're like, okay, I need to set a boundary of like, oh, I can serve at church only this many times a month or this many times a week.
Yeah.
And it's okay, because if you're in rest, not worrying, not anxious, but listening to the Lord and obeying him, that's different from being lazy and avoidant.
Yep.
Like, if, some people, the procrastination, is strong because it's based in anxiety. Like, you have an anxiety about doing something you don't want to do and you keep procrastinating it. And then, so that's not healthy. Or, maybe you're just so burnt out because you haven't been resting and you're so checked out and so burnt out that you're basically, I'm done. I'm done with life. I'm done with people. I'm over it. And I literally just completely check out. Well, at some point, you might need to take what would be called a sabbatical. Like, there's a lot of people who are like, okay, that's where you go into like vacation time or summer sabbatical, or there's something where you have an extended period of rest. That's like, it's kind of like when we were talking about the field being lay fallow for 1 year. Like, you work the field 7 years and you give the field a whole year break. Mm-hmm. Like, there's going to be periods of time in your life where not only do you take a Sabbath rest, but you also expand into like a sabbatical rest. And maybe in the summer, like, you just have a lighter schedule. Like, maybe you hustle during the year and during the holiday season, and summer you're like, you know what? I'm taking a step back. I'm only doing one thing a month, or, and I think it's good for organizations to do this. I think it's like, especially churches and stuff, it's like, there's gotta be built-in sabbatical time, built-in vacation time, built-in breaks that, gives people an additional, layer of rest. But that's just in the natural. Like we said, we're gearing towards on the spiritual. Like, they come together, right? Like, just like we have a spirit and a soul and it comes together. But you got to remember, the spirit is where everything originates. Everything from God originates in the spirit. So that spirit rest, like, not just when you're going for the Sabbath, do it, pray, ask God to help you. But also really go into that, okay, God, what does a Sabbath life look like? Like, what does a anxious, worry-free life look like?
That's good.
I was talking to someone this week about the fact that your circumstances are uncontrollable sometimes, and they shift and change, but they don't necessarily get easier. And challenges don't ever necessarily go away. But when God creates in you a new heart and resets your mind and gives you a mind of Christ and fills you with the fruit of the Spirit, you become better. So suddenly, it doesn't matter what the devil throws at you or the world throws at you. You're not responding in stress and worry. You're responding in peace and grace, right?
Yeah,
You can't wait around for your circumstances to be perfect. And if you're stuck in this in your life right now and you're going, oh, if only this were different, if only this were different, if only this were different, if only I could have this, you can't sit there and go, if only these were different, because you have no control of those things. You should be going, God, transform me. God, make me in your image. God, help me to bear up under it. Your yoke is easy, your burden is light. But like, help me to know what that is. Like, in the face of all these things, help me to do differently. And to like close up this whole thing, like, yes, we're talking about the Sabbath literally, but we're also talking about the Sabbath spiritually. And it's really important because as humans, we're here on earth and we're stuck here. until the rapture, and we're stuck here until the new earth, new heavens and new earth, and that's the 8th day. So when the scripture's talking about the 8th day, it's really like when everything is made new, when there's a total reset. And on that 8th day, it is a forever rest where every tear is wiped away. There's no hardship. There's no sickness. There's no death. We're literally going to enjoy a whole eternity worth of amazing wonder. So, if your hope is in that, well, so we just need to work through some stuff here on earth. But just remember that the goal is God's going to take you to an eternal rest that's never going to end. So, reframe your mind, let God reframe your thinking, adjust how you process this stuff, because you're going to be more efficient and more effective. Yes, because productivity is great, but God does not really focus on your productivity. He's focused on your heart, and he's focused on creating you into a new creation. So if you just let him do that in every area, you're going to win winner, winner, chicken dinner all across the board.
Yeah.
And he's going to give you the fortitude to say no when you have to say no.
Yeah.
If you're stuck, like I said, if you're stuck in that people pleasing, you're going to say yes when you're not supposed to say yes. And you're going to stress yourself out. And you're going to compromise. And, you only have one life to live. You only have one day. Oh, you only have this day. You only have this week. You only have this month. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you got to start thinking about it. It's like, I only have 1 week ahead of me. I need to rest. You know what I mean? Like, there's certain points where you just have to make this a pre-made decision. Like, when you make it a pre-made decision and it's like, I'm not going to compromise on it. This is what my life is like. This is what it's going to be. Then it doesn't matter what offers the world throws at you or what people say I need you to do or whatever. You check in with God, but you go, no, I'm sorry, I can't. Like...
And you do need a period of time that you are more strict with it and you restrict yourself down so that you can learn what works for you. Because we get in the way a lot of the times talking to God, so God might not be actually telling us something that we think he is because we're in the way. Our soul interferes with what he's trying to tell us. So, there is a period of time that I think that everyone's going to need a little bit of a restriction so that you can learn what's okay and what's not okay for you.
Yep.
Yeah. So we love you guys. Thank you for being here for this episode. If any of these things were helpful to you, I would love it. Like I said, we give it a thumbs up. If you like this kind of content and you like our conversations, we would love it if you would subscribe to our channel, share it with a friend. We'd love to be here with you guys and add to the audience and the people here at the Sevenfold. We really do make all of our content because God told us to, and we want to help you. We want to help to spread not only just the truth and the love of God, but we also want to practically help God's people. We want to help his sons and daughters. We don't want you to being deceived and living a certain way when you could be experiencing more freedom than you are. And so we would love it if you would share that with other people. And if you're down for that, then hit that subscribe button and stay around for a while because we would love to have you.
Yep. Thank you for following us along with this topic. And we pray that it blesses you in every way possible. Be blessed. We love you. Have a wonderful week, and we will see you next time.
Bye, everybody.